one of the first things I put forward was a proposal to audit homelessness spending in California, and it wasn't received super well. We've spent $20 billion on homelessness since 2018, and we've seen the problem grow by 77% in our state. And so, my big question was, well, if we're spending billions of dollars and it's getting worse, then, where is all that money going and how could we use it more effectively? It wasn't initially received super well, but I actually teamed up with a Democratic legislator out of San Jose, and we were able to come to a bipartisan agreement, and we passed that with bipartisan support out of the audit committee, and it's now going to be completed in October, and we're really excited to see what information that gives us to help inform our policy moving forward. So I do think there's ways that you can be effective for sure.
You were explaining this audit process before we hopped on. It doesn't have to go to Newsom to sign off, right?
Yeah, so I sit on the Joint Legislative Audit Committee, and it's probably one of my favorite committees because, first of all, it's a really important tool when it comes to just oversight and accountability for the state, but in particular for the state agencies and programs that are run by the executive branch, by Governor Newsom, right? And the great thing about it is when you introduce a bill in the legislature, you have to pass it through both houses and then get it signed by the governor. But with an audit, it just goes to one committee hearing. You have that committee hearing, and if you can convince your colleagues on that committee that this is important and they pass it, the state auditor gets right to work, and it just happens. And it doesn't need approval by the governor, which is a really important feature of the committee because oftentimes we're auditing his programs and his agencies, right? So I think it's a really, really useful tool that is probably underutilized in California.
I want to audit. Like, sign me up to help audit. I'm not even kidding.
Right.
I'll do it for free.
I mean, there's so many great things. We did the homelessness one, but we passed an audit to audit the middle income tax credit program that was a total disaster. The EDD, we've passed audits on just other big issues like that. Our roads, we actually passed an audit on where road funding is going, which I think is really good. So it's a really useful tool, I think.
I had never heard of this committee before, so that's interesting to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a powerful tool. And I always wonder, where does all that gas tax go when you drive over dilapidated roads over and over and over again? And their whole promise was, if we raise the taxes, we'll fix all the roads. Yeah. But I mean, I haven't seen roads be any marginally better since the gas tax has been since passed. So yeah, that's a very powerful tool. And I think, what's the committee makeup like? I mean, is there hope for more stuff to get audited or?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't. It's still pretty heavily Democratic, but I would say overall, most of the audits that I see, I would say 90% of them get approved. I mean, the ones that probably don't get approved are Republican audit requests, but there's still ways to work with them to an extent and try to get some of the stuff done. And I think it also shows that the needle on homelessness is moving. I mean, I really think that Democrats and Republicans have been kind of screaming this from the rooftops for a while, but I think Democrats, especially at the local level, are starting to wake up to, how big of a problem this actually is. And the reason for that is because they're hearing it every single day from their community. I mean, when I've done a number of public, like community meetings since I've been elected, and the top two issues are probably homelessness and roads. And I think that's probably the case in a lot of communities in California.
I want to continue on this line of talking about homelessness, but just as a suggestion, throw it in the suggestion box. I'd love to see an audit of the bullet train and what happened with that.
Yeah, you and me both. I actually think that's been attempted, and it was. I don't think that one. Although there have been a couple audits on that topic, I think, but nothing near what we need to see. But I totally agree with you. It's a mess.
I just want to see: is it as bad as True Detective made it out to be? I don't know if anyone else is a True
I
Detective
have
fan, and
watched
they
True Detective. Yes,
that whole
that
season.
was yeah.
Um,
That is
and
actually really funny.
if people don't know, there's a whole season basically about California and the bullet train and where all the money went. But yeah, homelessness, and I agree with you. I think Democrats are facing this everywhere, and I think it's basically the polling and the public backlash has really kind of goaded Democrats into action. I think that's
Yeah,
why you're starting to see a lot of Democrats take more hardline stances, encampments, issues like that. This care court, which Newsom is trying to roll out, um, shows like maybe a more hardline approach to homelessness. And it's interesting that it really had to come to their doorstep with Democrats before they finally had to do something. Meanwhile, we've been screaming about homelessness for 10, 20 years now, but now because
yeah.
it's uh, not politically advantageous, Democrats are finally picking
Yeah.
up the mantle for it.
No, I totally agree. I think it's definitely on the top of everyone's minds. I actually introduced a bill this year that was not successful, but it would have prohibited homeless encampments within 500 feet of schools and parks.
Hmm.
And that was rejected by the Public Safety Committee, which is kind of a trend in the Capitol. But, that's a policy that has been embraced by red and blue cities across the state. So, it wasn't some crazy idea. I actually took it from cities like Sacramento and San Diego that had already done it. So, I think the needle's definitely moving on that topic.
Aren't there laws about sales of alcohol within a certain distance of schools? And right? But
Mm-hmm.
we don't know, not to say that all homeless people are alcoholics, but we don't know what's going on in their camps, drugs, alcohol, so close to the campuses. So that's odd that they.
No, it's really frustrating. I mean, I've personally found needles in the park where my kids play, right? And I think, you know, that is becoming more and more of a trend. And it's something that it's a public health and safety crisis, in my opinion, right? I mean, it's important to get people the help that they need, but it's also important that we're protecting the most vulnerable people in our community. And all we were basically saying is kids deserve an open path to walk to school safely,
Mhm.
and to go to the park and play safely. I mean, I don't think that's really a lot to ask.
No, it's not.
So yeah, it's pretty frustrating. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other things we don't allow near schools. But previously, when I was on the school board, we had homeless individuals that would, come onto our campuses and talk to kids, and we had, security issues like that. And so this is, I feel like, a pretty reasonable request.
Right. I remember as kids, I grew up in California. I don't know if this was in other states, but they would say like, "Oh, be careful in the ball pit, like at McDonald's," because they would say that people throw their needles in there. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, have you
Yeah,
heard that? And now we're laughing, but now it's not funny. Like, it's actually their parks,
yeah,
and the parks are public.
yeah,
We're paying for those parks to be kept clean and secure, and then they're not,
yeah,
and that's very
exactly.
sad.
It is really sad, actually. Yeah, I know, razor blades in the Halloween candy and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
All right, yeah, I remember they would always say razor blades in the apples, which I'm like, I don't know how they got it into an apple and made it look so perfect. Um, so I guess gauging the temperature in Sacramento on homelessness, especially with Democrats, on a scale of like 1, they're not taking it super serious, to 10, DEFCON 3, we got to fix this right now. Where do you think Democrats are right now in Sacramento on trying to do anything or fix homelessness?
I think they're still trying to figure it out. I will say, up until this point, they haven't done much.
Hmm.
Um, up until like last year, our main measure of, homelessness response was how many dollars we've spent as a state. So, Newsom would continually say, "Oh, we've spent this many billion this year, and I've committed this many billion next year." And with zero like framing of where the money was going, what kind of effect that money was having. Was it actually getting people out of the cycle of homelessness? Was it providing mental health? Was it providing substance abuse treatment? Nothing like that. It was just, how many dollars are we spending? And I think that was absolutely the wrong approach. This year, he's gotten a little more serious about it, potentially because he's running for president. I don't know why. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but in San Francisco specifically, I mean, we've seen him send in the CHP. Seen him send in like, do these different like responses to the crime and the homelessness that's going on in San Francisco. So I think that's been really interesting to watch. I think he knows this is probably an electoral liability for him. But at the end of the day, I mean, I still don't think that we're serious. And the reason I don't think we're serious is because our state is still committed to what they call, or what is called the housing first approach to homelessness, which is essentially, you get people into housing first and you deal with their other issues later. And those issues are generally dealt with on a voluntary basis. So people are not required to get clean. They're not required to go into treatment. And so what we're seeing is these problems continue to grow, I think, because of that approach. Of the $20 billion or so that we've spent in the last 5 to 6 years, not a single dollar of that is eligible to go to programs that require sobriety. So there's actually a ton of programs in my community run by different nonprofits. St. John's program for real change. There's something called Powerhouse Ministries program for homelessness in the city of Folsom. And all of them have actual requirements. They say, we're going to give you housing, but you have to come to us clean, and you have to get clean. And that's kind of one of the requirements that are put on the assistance that they get. That's not the approach our state's taking as a whole. And all that money we're spending is going to programs that don't have those same requirements. And so until we change that, I feel like we're not taking the problem seriously.
Yeah, because it must be tough for Democrats because they're kind of stuck in a rock and a hard place where they have the civil liberty groups on one side, which they have been so aligned with for so many years. But then they have the voters who are getting frustrated because they see it every day and it just gets worse. So they have to kind of figure out, how do we do enough action to appease the voters so that they think we're doing something, but also not anger the civil rights group that supports us. So they're kind of in this rock and hard place. Like you're saying, they can't get too tough because it'll be the civil rights people will come out and say, oh, you can't do that. And the advocacy groups will come out and say, you can't do that. But not doing enough is not going to appease the voters. So they're really in a tough position, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see it. I mean, I think for them, they are in a tough position because of who they have to keep happy. But I think at the end of the day, I mean, look, civil rights are important. I mean, we have to make sure we're preserving people's rights as well. But at the end of the day, we can go farther in terms of, asking people to get treatment and get clean. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done on that topic. It'll be interesting to see if it shifts over the next couple of years.